Welcome to Whispered Clues. Tonight, we follow the sharp mind of Sherlock Holmes in the bones buried beneath the inn. A storm hides old sins. A cellar hides something colder. Where are you joining us from tonight? Pour your tea, draw the curtains, and let the mystery begin. The sound came first, a hollow tapping beneath the floorboards, as though London itself were trying to send us a message. Holmes's head turned before mine. He lifted a single finger in silence, and the rhythm came again, 3 slow knocks, then 1 abrupt pause. A code, or the prelude to a confession. Outside, the muffled roll of wheels on Baker Street faded, leaving only that uncanny echo beneath our feet. "It comes from the cellar," I murmured. Holmes did not answer. His eyes, grey as dusted steel, remained fixed upon the carpet where the faintest tremor shivered through the brass stand of his violin. He rose abruptly, every motion quiet, measured as though listening with his whole body. "Not the cellar, Watson. Below the cellar." He drew aside the hearthrug with a deliberate motion. The tapping ceased at once, like a hand snatched back in fear. Holmes smiled slightly, that narrow private smile which always preceded discovery. "You perceive, of course, that the visitor is already within the house." Before I could reply, Mrs. Hudson appeared at the door with an expression of alarm and a folded telegram upon her tray. "This just arrived, Mr. Holmes." The boy was pale as chalk. She hesitated, glancing at the disturbed rug. "And there's a smell of earth in the hallway." Holmes took the telegram but did not open it. "Earth," he repeated, as if testing the word for meaning. "Watson, fetch your coat." Within moments we were descending the narrow stair, the lamp in my hand throwing a wavering light upon the stone. The air below was damp, infused with that unmistakable odor of turned soil. Beneath the last step lay a trapdoor, half concealed by a stack of old wine crates. Holmes brushed away the dust with his sleeve, then touched his ear to the wood. A faint sound pulsed beneath like breathing restrained. "Alive," I whispered. "For the moment," he said. "Lift from the left side." We heaved the door open. Cold air rushed upward, carrying with it a whisper of something older than dust. The lamplight fell upon a narrow shaft leading deeper still, brick-lined, scarcely wide enough for a man. Holmes tied his scarf tightly, passed the lamp down first, and followed it into the gloom. I followed, unwilling to leave him to whatever lay below. The passage ended in a small stone chamber no larger than a pantry. The air trembled with the echo of dripping water. At the center stood an iron-bound chest, its lid broken and rimmed with damp soil. Around it, scattered bones gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Some human, some not. Holmes crouched beside the chest, his fingers tracing a dark stain along the rim. "Old," he said softly, "but not ancient. And yet see here the fracture of the femur, clean and precise. Surgeon's hand or a butcher's. The oral motif still, that steady drip seemed to count the seconds as his gaze moved to the wall. There, carved into the mortar, was a single set of initials, E.R. Holmes, brushed them gently, then turned toward me. "Watson, you recall the Exeter Inn at Highgate?" "I do. The case of the missing ledger. Then you may recall its landlord, Edward Rayner. He was buried 3 years ago." "Buried," I repeated slowly. "And yet precisely," Holmes said. "Someone beneath this house wishes us to reconsider the matter." A noise from above, the faint creak of the floorboards we had left behind. Holmes extinguished the lamp at once. In the sudden dark, the sound of the dripping water grew louder, nearer. Then, from the trap-door above, came a low, deliberate tap. 3 slow knocks, 1 pause. Holmes's whisper was scarcely audible. "He knows we are here." The breath of silence that followed seemed to deepen the darkness itself. I could just discern Holmes's outline against the faint sheen of the chest, his head tilted toward the ceiling where the sound had come. Then, without warning, the floorboards above groaned, and a trickle of dust fell upon his sleeve. Someone was moving with deliberate care directly over our heads. Holmes's hand found my arm, a light but urgent touch. "Keep still," he whispered. The next instant, we heard it again with the same deliberate rhythm, this time against the joists, 3 knocks, 1 pause. The signal repeated, softer, as though passed from one hidden hand to another. "There are 2, Holmes murmured, "a watcher above and one below. The communication is mechanical wood upon wood, not voice." The dripping resumed, steady as a clock measuring our danger. I felt the hairs rise at the nape of my neck. Holmes's eyes had taken on that peculiar inward gleam that signaled the machinery of his mind in motion. Note, Watson, how the rhythm alters in the pause. A hesitation of precisely 2 seconds. It is not a warning, it is reassurance. Reassurance for whom? For the one who cannot see, a servant obeying an unseen master. He moved soundlessly to the broken chest, examining the damp imprint left upon its side. This was opened within 48 hours. Whoever replaced the soil did so hurriedly. Observe the streaks of unabsorbed moisture. Before I could question him further, the faintest light flickered through a crack in the boards above, followed by the soft thud of retreating steps. Holmes rose swiftly. He withdraws. We must follow before he vanishes into the street. We climbed the shaft with the care of men ascending from a grave. The trap door closed behind us with a muted sigh. In the kitchen above, the lamplight trembled upon the cracked tiles. Mrs. Hudson was nowhere in sight. Holmes crossed the hallway and pressed his ear against the wall that separated our rooms from the neighboring house. "A passage," he said. "Narrow, perhaps an old delivery corridor between properties. Our visitor has made use of it." He turned to me with the briefest nod. "Revolver, Watson." I drew it at once. "Loaded. Then follow as softly as you can. No speech unless I address you." He pressed against the paneling until it yielded a finger's width, revealing a slit of darkness beyond. We slipped through into a space barely wide enough for our shoulders. The air was thick with the odor of damp timber and candle grease. As we advanced, a faint resonance came again, the tapping, now distant, guiding us like the toll of a submerged bell. After several yards, the passage turned sharply, ending in a wooden stair ascending to a trap in the ceiling. Holmes extinguished our lamp, preferring the faint moonlight that filtered through the cracks. The tapping ceased. Then a soft creak echoed above us, and a thin beam of lamplight appeared through a knothole in the plank. Holmes raised an eyebrow, motioning for silence. Through the aperture, I glimpsed a dim upper room. 2 figures stood by a table, one in rough workman's clothes, the other tall and stooped, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. Between them lay an opened bundle wrapped in canvas. A moment later, the taller man spoke, his voice low and dry as ashes. "You were told the chest would be gone by midnight." The workman trembled. "I tried, sir, but there was someone in the house, the gentleman with the pipe." He heard the noise below. "The gentleman with the pipe," the other repeated softly. "Then he has already found it." Holmes's hand tightened on my wrist to still me. The man continued, "If he speaks, all is lost. The inn, the records, even her name, do you understand?" The workman nodded miserably. "What must I do? Finish what you began." "Bury it again and vanish. I shall attend to the rest." A pause followed. The taller man turned slightly, and for a fleeting instant the lamplight caught his profile, thin, elegant, marked by a scar along the jaw. Holmes's breath touched my ear. "Sir Julian Marrow," he whispered, "formerly of the Exeter Inn." Before I could react, the plank beneath my knee gave a faint creak. Both men froze. The lamplight swayed violently as the workman turned. "Someone's there," he gasped. Holmes acted instantly, pushing open the trap and springing upward with the grace of a cat. "Stay where you are," he commanded. The taller man snuffed the lamp and bolted toward the far door. I followed Holmes through the opening as he seized the trembling workman by the sleeve. "Who is he?" Holmes demanded. "Speak." But the fellow only shook his head, eyes wild with terror. "He'll kill me if I—" His protest ended in a gasp as the trap door below him burst open under its own weight, the boards collapsing into darkness. Holmes lunged forward, grasping his collar just as the man slipped. For one awful second, I thought both would fall into the shaft, but Holmes braced his feet and hauled the man up to safety. The noise of retreating footsteps echoed down the stairwell. Holmes released his prisoner gently. "Against the wall. Compose yourself. You're safe now." "Safe?" the man stammered. "He'll come back, he always comes back." Holmes's tone softened, a rare gentleness cutting through his urgency. "You mean Sir Julian?" The workman nodded, tears streaking the grime on his cheeks. "He made me dig, sir. Said there were debts to pay and secrets better buried. I didn't know there were bones, God help me. I didn't know." "Where does he go when he leaves here?" "I don't know," he sobbed. "Only that he listens through the floor. Said the walls speak to him." Holmes rose slowly, then let us follow the echoes. He turned toward the door, his face set with the austere calm of purpose. "Watson, we shall pay a visit to Highgate before dawn." At that moment, the sound came again, 3 slow knocks, 1 pause, but this time it rose from the walls themselves, as if the entire house were answering a call it had long awaited. The vibration of that final knock still quivered in the plaster as Holmes motioned for silence. His face was pale, the eyes luminous with concentration, as if he were listening not to the sound itself, but to its origin within the very marrow of the house. Then he turned sharply toward the workmen. "You will remain here," he said. "Bolt the door. Speak to no one. If anyone knocks, make no reply." The man stammered his obedience. Holmes grasped my arm, and we descended the narrow passage once more, our boots striking hollow against the floorboards that seemed to hum with residual echoes. Outside, Baker Street lay hushed beneath a veil of thin fog. The gas lamps burned low, their halos blurred. Yet the rhythm of those subterranean knocks persisted faintly in my mind, like a heartbeat one cannot unhear. Holmes hailed a cab with a curt gesture. "To Highgate," he told the driver. Then, settling back, he drew the telegram from his pocket, the one he had left unopened in our haste. As the cab jolted forward, he unfolded it with care. "From Lestrade," he said after a glance. "A report of an unmarked grave discovered in the churchyard of St. Anne's, Highgate. Dated this morning." His eyes lifted to mine. "Coincidence, Watson?" "Hardly," I said. "Precisely. Which means Sir Julian has accelerated his work. The question is why tonight?" The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on cobblestone merged with that phantom knocking in my ears. Holmes seemed to hear it too, for his gaze fixed on the window as though the sound had become an audible trail leading us onward. "Observe the logic," he said quietly. "An innkeeper dies. A cellar conceals bones not his own, and a baronet risks discovery to disturb a grave. There is unity here, though veiled by time. And the initials carved in the chamber, Wallior?" Holmes smiled faintly. "Edward Rayner, whose ledger went missing with his reputation. You may recall that the Exeter Inn once served as a meeting place for certain financiers of dubious conscience." I frowned. "Forgery?" "Possibly. But forgery does not require burial." His tone sharpened. "No, Watson. What is buried is memory itself." The cab turned into the northern road, where fog thickened like wool. Through the haze I saw the outline of the old Highgate Inn, its shutters closed, its sign swinging listlessly in the wind. Holmes paid the driver and stepped down, the faint crunch of gravel marking each stride. The air here carried the chill of old secrets. He paused before the gate. "Do you hear it?" I listened. From somewhere beneath the earth came a hollow resonance. 3 slow beats, 1 pause. My skin prickled. "It follows us," I said. "Not followed," Holmes corrected. "It guides." We crossed the churchyard where the gravestones leaned like weary sentinels. The sexton's hut was dark. Holmes approached the fresh mound of earth marked only by a wooden stake and the number 47. "Lestrade's report," he murmured. "An unmarked burial female, approximately 30 years of age." "Female?" I repeated. "But Rayner—" "Exactly," Holmes said. "Let us see how deep his guilt runs." He knelt, examining the soil with his fingers, then held them to the lamplight. Still damp, interred within the last 12 hours. Someone wished for her to be forgotten in haste. His eyes flicked toward the church door, and yet the parish register would not omit an entry without persuasion. "We must find the vicar." Before I could reply, the door of the inn creaked open across the road. A tall silhouette stepped into the lantern glow, its outline unmistakable even through mist. Sir Julian Marrow. He moved with the stiffness of a man pursued by conscience, glancing toward the churchyard before striding down the lane. Holmes's whisper cut the air. "Stay behind me." We followed at a measured distance. The fog absorbed all sound save for the rhythmic crunch of Marrow's boots, a new echo that fell into the same cadence 3 steps. Pause. My heart beat in synchrony, unwillingly ensnared by that rhythm. Holmes's hand rose suddenly. He stops. Marrow had reached a low gate leading to a back garden behind the vicarage. He drew a key from his coat, unlocked it, and slipped inside. Holmes advanced noiselessly until we could see him through the lattice fence. In the moon's frail light, he knelt beside a mound of disturbed soil and began to dig with a small spade, each strike of metal against earth echoing that same infernal pattern. "Watson," Holmes whispered, marking the precision. "Not a random labor ritual." I watched, transfixed, as Marrow unearthed a small wooden box wrapped in canvas. He opened it, revealing what appeared to be a bundle of papers tied with ribbon. Then he looked skyward as if appealing to some unseen judge. "Forgive me," he muttered. But she left me no peace. Holmes stepped forward, his voice cutting cleanly through the mist. "Then you shall find none until truth is spoken." Marrow recoiled, the box dropping from his hands. The contents spilled letters, faded photographs, a small locket gleaming in the moonlight. He made no effort to flee. "I thought I buried her twice," he said hoarsely. "Once beneath my house and once in my memory. But she returns in every sound, the knocks, the dripping, they will not cease." Holmes approached slowly. "The woman beneath number 47, your wife?" Marrow nodded, trembling. "She was to inherit nothing if she married me. We made a bargain to fake her death, to free her from her family's claim. But Rayner discovered the deception. He demanded payment to remain silent. And when payment failed, Holmes said, 'You silenced him.'" Marrow's voice broke. "I did not mean to kill him. He fell, God forgive me, he fell during our struggle. I hid him beneath the cellar, but she would not leave. Said she heard him call from the earth." The wind stirred the letters at their feet, making them rustle like whispers. Holmes stooped, lifting the locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman, pale, serene, eyes wide with unspoken sorrow. "And tonight?" "She came again," Marrow whispered. I heard her through the floor. 3 knocks, 1 pause. The same plea every night reminds me. Holmes closed the locket gently. The sound, Sir Julian, was not her ghost, but the living consequence of guilt amplified by the hollow architecture you yourself built above deceit. Marrow sank to his knees. "Then what am I to do?" "Tell the truth," Holmes said quietly. "The dead require no other service." A faint sound cut through the silence, the measured toll of the church bell striking 2. But behind it, from the ground beneath Merrow's hands, came once more that same eerie knocking, soft yet unmistakable. Holmes froze, every muscle poised. "Watson," he said, his voice low and intent, "that is not imagination." Holmes crouched, pressing his ear to the ground beside Merrow's trembling hands. The rhythmic knocking came again with 3 slow taps, one pause vibrating through the damp earth like the echo of a buried heartbeat. I knelt beside him, my pulse answering in kind. For the first time that night, Holmes looked unsettled. "This is no echo," he murmured. "There's air beneath an opening." He straightened swiftly. "Fetch that spade." Merrow stumbled backward. "You mean to dig here?" "Unless you wish the dead to finish the conversation for us," Holmes replied. "Watson, the lamp." I held the lantern close as he drove the blade into the soil. Each thrust was met by a dull reverberation, the sound hollow yet insistent, as though the ground itself demanded release. Holmes worked with quiet ferocity, methodical even in haste. At last, the spade struck wood with a muffled thud. He cleared away the soil until the edge of a small coffin emerged old, warped, its lid cross-nailed. Holmes brushed the dirt from its surface, eyes narrowing. "See these nails? Hammered inward, not outward. Someone sealed it from above while it was occupied." Merrow covered his face. "I told you she wanted to be left silent," Holmes snapped. "No superstition now. Truth, man, truth." He pried the lid loose with the handle of the spade. The hinges creaked. Inside lay the remains of a woman clothed in faded linen, her hair still faintly auburn where it had escaped the shroud. Around her wrist was a bracelet engraved with the initials E.R. I caught my breath. "Rayner." Holmes's gaze was fixed upon the wrist. "No, Watson. Eleanor Rayner, his wife." He turned sharply to Merrow. "You knew her?" Merrow's voice was barely audible. "She was his widow when we met. He was gone and she was desperate. Her debts, her loneliness. She said he'd abandoned her, but when the creditors came, she feared they'd learn the truth that he hadn't died at all." Holmes exhaled slowly, piecing the fragments aloud. "So she married you under false widowhood, and when Rayner returned alive and seeking reconciliation, silenced him to protect her." Merrow's face crumpled. "She begged me not to. I only meant to frighten him. The fall was an accident." Holmes's expression softened by a degree. "Yet she could not endure the guilt. And tonight, when you disturbed her grave, the sound you heard was not her spirit, but the collapse of the rotted timber beneath the coffin's floor." I leaned closer, peering into the grave. Beneath the coffin lay a fissure in the earth, a dark cavity exhaling cool air. "Holmes," I said, "there's something beneath." He knelt again, striking a match to illuminate the hollow. The flame trembled, revealing bricks forming the mouth of a narrow passage running under the vicarage. The knocking resumed faintly, deeper now, metallic in tone. Holmes's voice was a thread of calculation. "Watson, that is not the echo of air. It's iron striking iron. Someone is below, working." Merrow backed away, shaking his head. "No living man can be down there." "It's sealed." "Then it must have been unsealed," Holmes said grimly. "Stay where you are." Without hesitation, he lowered himself into the fissure, gripping the edge of the coffin for balance. I followed, the matchlight dimming as we descended into a space scarcely high enough to stand. The air was fetid, yet carried a strange rhythmic vibration, the metallic tapping, relentless and deliberate. Holmes raised his lamp. The passage widened into a cramped chamber supported by timber beams. At its center stood a rusted iron safe, its door hanging askew, freshly pried open. Scattered papers lay strewn across the floor like white leaves. A lantern burned low nearby, its wick guttering. A figure crouched beside the safe, gaunt, mud-streaked, one sleeve torn. He turned sharply at our intrusion, and the lamplight fell upon his face. It was the workman from Baker Street. Holmes's tone was icily calm. "I instructed you to remain where you were." The man's voice quavered. "He said she'd call me if I left." But the knocking came again. "I thought it was her, sir, begging me to set her free." "You mean Sir Julian," Holmes said. "He manipulated your fear." "No," the man cried. It was her voice, soft as wind through the floorboards. She said the ledger was still below. Said it would damn us both. Holmes stooped to the safe, retrieving a small leather-bound book. "The ledger of the Exeter Inn," he said softly. "So the dead do speak through ink and arithmetic." He flipped the pages, his eyes racing over the entries. "Note these figures, Watson. Payments from the Marrow estate to one Edward Rayner, continuing months after his supposed death. Proof of collusion. Sir Julian's guilt is both moral and financial." The workman sank to his knees. "Then it's over." Holmes closed the ledger. "Not yet. You will carry this above ground and deliver it to Inspector Lestrade at once. Tell him Holmes sends evidence of fraud and murder combined. He will know what to do." The man hesitated. "And what of her?" Holmes met his gaze, voice steady. "She is beyond reach, but her memory may at last rest." He turned toward the narrow shaft, gesturing for me to ascend first. As I placed my foot upon the beam, a deep groan reverberated through the chamber. The walls trembled. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. "Holmes!" I shouted. The ground. "Move, Watson!" he cried. We scrambled upward as the timbers buckled. A deafening crack split the darkness, and the last thing I heard before we burst into the grave above was the collapse of earth swallowing the passage whole. We tumbled onto the grass, gasping. Marrow knelt nearby, his face ghostly in the lantern light. The rhythmic knocking was gone. Only the faint hiss of settling soil remained. Holmes brushed the dirt from his coat and spoke quietly. "The dead are silent now." But even as he said it, a single echo rose from the ground, one solitary knock, faint as breath, and then nothing. Holmes remained crouched by the disturbed earth, his expression unreadable as the solitary knock faded into the damp air. Marrow's breath came in ragged bursts, half sob, half whisper. "It won't stop," he muttered. "Every time I try to bury it, it comes back." Holmes straightened, brushing the soil from his sleeves. "Not it, Sir Julian. Truth. You may cover it, distort it, pray over it, but truth breathes. And tonight, it seems, it has taken to knocking." He turned to me sharply. "Watson, the lamp." We returned to Baker Street at once. Marrow stumbled forward, grasping Holmes's coat. "You can't leave me here. It will start again when you go." Holmes's gaze did not soften. "Then come with us and speak before the law. Only daylight can silence what haunts you." The man's shoulders sagged, the resistance gone. "I will come," he said faintly. Holmes gave a brief nod and strode ahead. As we made our way through the churchyard, the fog closed around us like a living thing, and behind us, faint but distinct, the rhythm resumed 3 knocks, 1 pause. Marrow flinched with each beat. Holmes did not turn his head. "Not haunting," he said under his breath. "A pursuit." By the time we reached the road, a constable's lantern swung into view. Lestrade himself emerged from the mist, his moustache glistening with dew. "Holmes, your note. Found your messenger half dead with fright. What's this about an unregistered burial?" "Several, perhaps," Holmes replied crisply. "We'll need men at the vicarage and the inn before dawn. But first shelter for this man. He carries more than his own guilt." Lestrade squinted at Marrow. "The baronet? I thought he had been dead for 3 years. Death is a fashionable refuge for the guilty," Holmes said dryly. "Kindly see that he survives the night. Watson and I will return to our rooms. There is analysis to be done." We rode in silence back toward Baker Street. The rhythmic clatter of the carriage wheels merged with the echo of those subterranean knocks until they seemed one and the same. Holmes leaned forward, hands steepled beneath his chin. "Note the progression, Watson. The sound has followed us across 3 locations: cellar, churchyard, and road. It cannot be mere coincidence." "You think someone is signaling us?" "Not Ushim. Marrow is the intended recipient. Each recurrence coincides with a decision he makes: concealment, confession, surrender. The sound mirrors conscience, but its source must be flesh and blood. When we arrived, the first light of morning paled in the eastern sky. Mrs. Hudson's anxious face greeted us. "I've had no peace since you left, Mr. Holmes," she said. "Strange noises on the floor all night, like someone walking beneath the house." Holmes's eyes flickered. "Beneath?" He set down his coat. "Watson, fetch the revolver again." Before I could protest, a low tapping sounded from beneath the sitting-room floor. 3 measured strokes, 1 pause. Holmes knelt, pressing his ear to the rug exactly as he had hours before. "Consistent tone," he said. "Metallic surface, roughly 6 feet below." I felt a chill, but the cellar lies no deeper than 3. "Precisely," he replied. "Which means the signal travels through the pipework. Clever if you wish to haunt without ever showing your face." He traced the direction of the sound toward the fireplace. "It originates from the flue. Someone has gained access from the rear alley, tapping on the soot pipe connected to our grate. Without another word, he seized the poker and struck the metal grate 3 times in return. The answer came immediately, 3 taps, 1 pause. Holmes's voice was razor-sharp. "Watson, stay behind me." He crossed to the door and flung it open. The early light revealed a tall figure standing motionless in the hallway, hat low, coat dripping with dew. It was Lestrade. "Holmes," he said, startled. "You look as if you've seen a ghost?" "Hardly," Holmes replied. "I was expecting one." "Why are you here?" "I came to warn you," Lestrade said. "Your messenger's dead." The workman was found in the cab yard near King's Cross, struck from behind. Holmes's eyes darkened. Then our signaller grows impatient. Marrow, who had slumped in the corner chair, let out a broken cry. "He's coming for me. I told you it would not end." He seized my arm in desperation. "You don't understand. He made me swear never to speak. He's been listening all along." Holmes's gaze turned toward the hearth, where faint ash drifted upward. Listening, yes. The flue carries more than sound. It carries smoke, and if one knew where the pipe emerged behind the inn, perhaps one could use it to signal and to observe. He strode to his desk and snatched the small leather ledger we had retrieved. "There is one name here we overlooked, James Cutter, the Exeter Inn's former porter." I recalled the gaunt frame of the workman's supposed companion in the upper room, the one who had fled into the night. "You think Cutter lives?" "Lives," Holmes said grimly, "and digs. He alone would know the tunnels connecting the inn, the vicarage, and the old delivery corridors of Baker Street." The sound was his hand upon iron. A faint creak came from within the wall. Holmes froze, then whispered, "He's here." We turned toward the fireplace. From the black throat of the chimney came the slow scrape of metal against brick, then 3 deliberate knocks. Holmes's expression was carved in concentration. "Watson," he said softly, "when I gave the word, pull the rug aside. The trap beneath the hearth will open. He cannot escape upward as the soot vent narrows. We shall draw him down." The next moment, a rush of soot cascaded into the grate, followed by a shadowed hand gripping the edge. Holmes signaled sharply. I tore the rug away, revealing the hidden trap we had discovered earlier. He slammed his boot upon the floorboard lever, and with a heavy clatter, the hearthstone tilted downward. There was a cry from within the chimney, half human, half beast, followed by the muffled thud of a body striking hollow wood. The sound echoed through the pipes and passages like a dying bell. 3 dull beats, 1 fading pause. Holmes stood motionless. "The pursuit," he said quietly, "has ended where it began, beneath our feet." Holmes was the first to move. He seized the lamp and descended through the tilted hearthstone, his boots striking the iron-rung ladder that plunged into the narrow cavity below. The air was thick with soot and the smell of damp ash. I followed close behind, revolver drawn, the light trembling in my hand. At the base of the shaft lay a tangle of limbs coated in black dust, his breath shallow, his hand clutching a length of metal pipe. Holmes crouched over him, one hand raised for silence. The man's eyes flickered open. Beneath the grime, I recognized him as the porter from the Exeter Inn, James Cutter, though the face was wasted to a skull. He gave a hoarse laugh that rattled like a dying bell. "You always were quicker than I thought, Mr. Holmes." "Alive then," Holmes said quietly. "Barely." Cutter's grin widened despite the blood on his lips. "Alive enough to finish what he began." "He," Holmes repeated. "You refer to Marrow." The man's laugh died. "Marrow buried the bones, but I kept the key. You can't silence the dead if someone remembers the tune." The rhythmic knocking seemed to answer him, faint but distinct, somewhere beyond the wall. Holmes lifted his head. "You built the signal tunnels." Cutter nodded weakly. "For Rayner. He wanted secret ways to move contraband, the ledgers, the gold, the names. Said no one would hear if a man whispered through brick. I used the old drainways under Baker Street. When they turned on him, I kept the map. All of it mine." His fingers twitched toward the pipe. Holmes's voice was low, deliberate. "And you used the same tunnels to torment your employer, to remind him of his guilt." Cutter's breath rasped. "He paid me to keep quiet, then left me to rot. So I let the pipe speak. Every night the same rhythm till he'd confess." 3 knocks, 1 pause, Holmes said, the cadence of guilt itself. Cutter coughed, a red stain blooming at the corner of his mouth. "You can't stop it now. It's in the walls. Every house on this street breathes the same air." Holmes's eyes flashed. "You've been using the entire underground network. The sound carries through the cast-iron mains gas, water, even the sewer vents. Ingenious, but fatal. The vibrations weakened the supports beneath your passage." The man's head lolled back. "Then the city will bury me too." He gave a final wheezing laugh, and the pipe slipped from his grasp, striking the stone floor with 3 dull notes and a dying pause. Holmes stood slowly. "Watson, he's gone." I bent over the still form. His pulse stopped with the last beat. Holmes regarded the body for a long moment before turning toward the narrow arch at the rear of the chamber. Yet his work may outlive him. "Listen." From beyond the arch came a deep metallic groan, followed by a hollow rumbling that grew steadily louder. The bricks vibrated beneath our hands. "Collapse?" I asked. "Worse," Holmes replied. "A backflow through the disused conduit. The gas mains run directly beneath." If Cutter tampered with them, a hiss interrupted him sharp. Rising, unmistakable. The flame of our lamp wavered. Holmes seized it and snuffed it out at once. "Move quickly. 1 spark and Baker Street becomes a crater." We climbed the iron ladder with the sound of rushing gas beneath us. As we reached the sitting room, Lestrade burst through the door, revolver drawn. "Holmes." The inspector's men found fissures under the adjoining houses. The streets being evacuated. "Good," Holmes said curtly. "Get Marrow out as well. His penance need not include asphyxiation." Lestrade nodded and vanished. Holmes dropped to one knee beside the hearthstone, feeling the faint current of gas rising through the seam. "Watson, open the windows. The whole system must vent before we risk light again." As I threw open the panes, the morning fog rolled in, carrying a chill that mingled with the acrid scent of the gas. Holmes remained motionless, eyes half closed, listening. "It diminishes," he murmured. The flow's reversing. Cutter's final act, perhaps closing his own valves before death. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of cooling pipes. Then came a new sound, soft, irregular, like the hesitant tapping of rain upon the sill. I turned sharply, but the sky was clear. The rhythm continued with 3 delicate notes. One pause. Holmes smiled faintly. "Relax, Watson. The echo lingers in your ear. The mind, once attuned to pattern, cannot easily forget it." "I could swear it's real," I said. "In a sense, it is," he replied. "Every man who lies leaves behind a resonant, unfinished cadence. It fades only when truth restores harmony." He rose, brushing soot from his waistcoat. "Come, Watson. We must see Sir Julian. There remains the question of his wife's bracelet and the small matter of who placed it on the wrong wrist." I frowned. The wrong wrist? Holmes turned toward me with that brief glint of satisfaction I knew so well. Indeed. The bracelet upon Eleanor Rayner's arm bore no clasp. It was solid shut, yet her bones show burn marks where it was cut free. Someone removed it and replaced it after death. The question is why. I stared at him, to disguise the identity of the body. "Exactly," Holmes said. "The remains beneath the vicarage may not have been hers at all." The words hung between us like the residue of smoke. Holmes moved to the window, staring out into the whitening dawn. "The case deepens, Watson. Cutter's death was not the conclusion. It was the overture. From far below, muffled by the settling earth, came one last tremor, a faint, rhythmic vibration, 3 slow beats, one pause. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "The overture," he repeated, to a requiem still unfinished. Holmes stood utterly still, his profile etched against the pale morning light. "An unfinished requiem, Watson," he said at last. "And the next movement begins where her name was erased." "Eleanor Rayner's grave?" I asked. "Her name is carved in stone, yet the bones beneath it tell a different story." He turned sharply, all thought returning to purpose. "Fetch your coat. We are going to the mortuary." Within the hour, we stood in the cold chamber of St. Anne's, the air heavy with disinfectant and stillness. The body recovered from the vicarage lay upon a slab, shrouded in linen. Lestrade waited nearby, notebook in hand. "You'll not make me believe this isn't the same woman, Holmes," he said. "The bracelet, the letters on her shift all fit." "Appearances, Lestrade," Holmes replied, drawing back the cloth. "They deceive precisely because they fit too well." He leaned close to the remains, his fingers tracing the line of the jaw, the scorched wrist where the bracelet had been reattached. "Observe, Watson, the teeth. No sign of decay, none of the wear one would expect from a woman of 30 years who lived through hardship. And here this scar upon the temple. Neatly stitched, yet post-mortem." I felt a chill. "You mean this woman was altered after death?" Holmes nodded. "To resemble another. Eleanor Rayner was 5'4". This body measures an inch taller. Someone made a substitution, using the bracelet as confirmation. They required a corpse to bury quickly, and Rayner had disappeared conveniently." Lestrade frowned. "Then where is the real Eleanor?" Holmes's gaze shifted toward the small table beside the slab. Among the recovered objects lay the bracelet, the locket, and a folded scrap of parchment blackened at the edges. He unfolded it with delicate care. A letter, half burned. "Read, Watson." I took it and read aloud. "To be beneath him no longer. He promised the sea, not the cellar. Tell him I shall walk where he cannot follow." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "You see, she lived beyond that grave. She meant to escape both men, the husband who betrayed her and the baronet who profited by deceit. Lestrade tapped his notebook. So what are we looking at here, then? Cutter, Marrow, Rayner, every one of them tangled in this mess. Holmes replaced the letter. Not tangled, Inspector interlocked. Cutter built the tunnels, Rayner used them, Marrow sealed them, and Eleanor vanished through them. What if she did not die at all, but fled through the very channels they believed would hide their crimes? The thought startled me. Then the knocking was her signal first, Holmes interrupted softly. The rhythm the men later mimicked to haunt one another. She taught them the code, and they turned it into superstition. Lestrade looked skeptical. A living woman hiding underground for years. That's fanciful even for you. Holmes's tone sharpened. Fanciful? Hardly. There are miles of disused tunnels beneath Highgate old wine cellars, drainage shafts, catacombs. If she sought refuge, she could survive unseen, emerging only to take what she needed. He straightened, pulling on his gloves. We must find where the rhythm began. Cutter's maps would show it. Those burned with him, I said quietly. Holmes smiled faintly. Not all. You forget, Watson, I read quickly. From his coat pocket he drew a folded scrap of paper smudged with soot. He spread it across the mortuary table. Cutter's final notes. The pattern of his knocks corresponds to points along this line. See here, the inn, the vicarage, and finally, Baker Street. But there's a fourth mark, son to age, cut off mid-notation. Lestrade leaned over. S.H. St. Helens. Or, Holmes said, the Shepherd's Hollow, the old quarry beneath the ridge. I remembered the legend miners lost in a collapse, tunnels sealed for safety decades ago. If she hid there, then she still hides, Holmes said. The echo we heard at dawn may not have been Cutter's death, but a warning. Lestrade slammed his notebook shut. You're chasing ghosts now. Holmes regarded him coolly. Ghosts do not leave burn marks from lamps or letters written in living ink. Watson, come. We left the inspector muttering behind us. Outside, the day had brightened, but the air felt heavy with unspent rain. Holmes walked briskly toward the waiting cab. It is almost elegant, he said. A woman presumed dead, using her own burial to vanish. The bracelet was her safeguard, the one object all men trusted to identify her. She left it with a corpse and walked free. Then she has been watching them all along. Holmes's voice dropped. Or listening. Remember the words of the workman. She said the walls speak to her. Perhaps they did. The tunnels were her ears. We rode in silence through the northern road until the city thinned to grey fields. The hollow lay half a mile beyond, a yawning scar in the hillside fenced with rusted wire. Holmes dismissed the driver and advanced on foot. Each step sent loose stones skittering into the pit below. A faint wind whispered through the weeds, producing that same unsettling rhythm, 3 sighs, 1 pause. Holmes halted. Even nature keeps her time. He knelt, brushing aside the dirt near a collapsed wooden beam. Beneath it lay an iron handle half buried in mud. He grasped it and pulled. The ground shifted, revealing a narrow passage descending into shadow. Shepherd's Hollow, he said quietly. Let us see if the shepherd still tends her flock. We descended single file, the lantern casting trembling circles upon the walls. The air was damp, alive with the sound of dripping water. Somewhere ahead, the steady cadence resumed metal on stone. 3 taps, 1 pause. Not echo now, but deliberate. Holmes whispered, alive. We moved forward until the tunnel opened into a small chamber. A lantern burned upon a crate. Beside it stood a woman, her hair streaked with grey, her eyes calm and unafraid. She raised her hand and struck the wall with the handle of a spade 3 times, then once more after a pause. Holmes lowered his lamp. Eleanor Rayner, I presume. Her voice was soft but steady. You're late, Mr. Holmes. I wondered when you would come to bury me properly." Holmes inclined his head slightly, as if greeting an apparition from reason rather than faith. "You have been long in darkness, Mrs. Rayner," he said, "but not forgotten." The woman's eyes held him with a calm beyond exhaustion. "Not forgotten," she echoed. "I was buried twice, Mr. Holmes, once by men's hands and once by their silence. Which remembrance do you speak of?" Holmes stepped closer, his voice gentler now. "Of truth, madam. It has been clawing its way back through earth and guilt alike. You heard its knocking as we have." Eleanor gave a faint smile, weary and distant. "It wasn't guilt, but a signal. A code I built with Cutter when I still believed escape possible. We'd strike the pipes to speak without voice. When they began to answer me, I knew he'd been caught. I thought the pattern would die with him. I could hardly believe my ears." "You and Cutter worked together?" She turned toward me, the lamplight tracing the worn lines of her face. "He was no villain, Doctor. We fled together after Rayner's schemes collapsed. But he loved gold more than freedom. He thought to sell me back to Marrow, and so I ran again into these tunnels. For years, they mistook my hiding for a haunting." Holmes's tone sharpened. "Then the bones under the vicarage. Who were they?" "Another," she said softly. "A woman from the parish, nameless to them but not to me. She died of fever in these tunnels. I used her body, her bracelet gone to ash, to fashion my own grave. It bought me time." The revelation stunned me. "You lived here beneath London all this while?" She nodded. "At first I counted days. Later, only sounds. The dripping, the knocks, was the only proof the world still breathed above me." Holmes's expression was unreadable. "And tonight you resumed the signal?" "Because he was near," she said. "Marrow." I felt him digging again. He always comes when the guilt stirs. I wanted him to hear me, to know I was still beneath him, where he left me. Holmes's gaze flicked to the walls, and Cutter responded. "I heard his pipe strike days ago," she whispered. Then silence. I knew what that meant. Holmes folded his arms, thinking aloud. "So Cutter, haunted by what he'd done, became your unwilling herald. He carried your rhythm from house to house, through every pipe and hollow that joined your past to his. And when he died, the sound remained a dying system echoing its own confession." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the locket from the crate. Inside was the same miniature we had seen before her own face, younger, unshadowed. "I meant only to vanish," she said, "but every man who tried to bury me buried himself instead." Holmes's voice softened again. "You have been wronged, madame, yet you have wronged others by your silence. Rayner, dead by greed, Cutter by obsession, Marrow by guilt, each tangled in the web of your choosing." She looked up sharply. "You think I chose this?" "I think you endured it," he said, "but endurance too has consequences. Men cannot fight phantoms without creating more." A heavy quiet settled. Even the waters seemed to still. Then, faintly, the familiar rhythm returned, 3 hollow knocks, one pause coming not from the wall but from above, faint as if through miles of stone. Eleanor's face blanched. "He's found me." Holmes seized the lantern. Watson quickly extinguished the light. We doused the flame. The chamber fell into near blackness, lit only by the dull sheen of damp stone. Above, the sound repeated. Closer now, a shovelful of dirt fell through the cracked ceiling. Holmes's whisper was calm, measured. "He comes to erase the last witness." Eleanor's breath caught. I buried him once already. The next moment, a shaft of light speared through the fissure as a board splintered overhead. Holmes motioned for silence, then spoke in a tone as cold as steel. "Sir Julian, your grave-digging habits persist." A voice echoed from above, shaking with rage and fear. "She was supposed to stay buried." "Yet she outlived your conscience," Holmes replied. Marrow's silhouette appeared through the gap, his face smeared with soil, his hand gripping a revolver. "You'll not take her from me again." He shouted, "She belongs below." Holmes stepped forward, his tone steady as stone. "You have mistaken possession for penitence. Lay down the weapon, or the earth will claim you for the third time." The man hesitated. The air hummed with tension, the rhythm returning in the background this time quickened, hammering like a heart on the verge of rupture. Then came the metallic click of the revolver's hammer. I raised my own weapon instinctively, but before either could fire, the ceiling gave way with a thunderous crack. Earth and timber crashed between us, filling the chamber with dust and echo. Through the chaos, I heard Holmes's shout, "Watson," to her, and the faint cry of the woman swallowed by falling debris. When the rumbling ceased, all was still except for a single sound, 3 hollow thuds, one drawn-out pause. It was no longer the rhythm of message or haunting, but of something heavier, and finally the measured collapse of a man and his sin. Holmes coughed, wiping the grit from his face. "He's buried himself at last," he said quietly. "But whether she survives that we must discover." He grasped my wrist, pulling me toward the gap where the lantern had fallen. Its flames sputtered weakly among the stones, casting just enough light to show a narrow space beyond, untouched by the fall. Holmes's eyes met mine, fierce with determination. "Through there, Watson." Quickly before the knocking stops altogether. We forced our way through the gap, the air thick with lime and falling grit. Holmes led, his lantern swinging like a will-o'-the-wisp, painting tremors of gold upon the walls. The passage bent sharply downward, then widened into a small hollow still half filled with dust. A faint cough came from the shadows ahead, and I saw the outline of a woman rising to her knees, Eleanor Rayner, her face ghostly beneath a mask of powdered stone. Holmes was beside her at once. "You are not hurt?" "Bruised," she managed, "but alive." He offered her his arm, steady and precise. "Then Providence has spared you for a purpose, yet unfinished." A low groan reverberated from behind, the sound of shifting debris. I turned, revolver raised, expecting silence. Instead came a faint, dragging noise, boots scraping across stone. Through the haze of dust, a figure emerged, coughing violently, one hand clutching a half-broken revolver. Sir Julian Merrow's face was streaked with blood and disbelief. Holmes's voice was calm. "I advised you to lay down that weapon." Merrow's expression twisted with desperation. "You think this ends with her alive? She's the one who ruined us all." Eleanor's voice rose, trembling but firm. "I ruined no one. You ruined yourself when you chose deceit over mercy." The man's hand shook as he aimed the gun toward her. Holmes moved not an inch. "Watson, no sudden motion," he said softly. "Observe his thumb. The hammer's jammed with dust. The weapon is useless." Merrow's fingers clenched, panic dawning as he realized Holmes spoke truth. He threw the revolver aside and staggered toward the woman. "You don't understand. She's not what she says she was with Rayner before me. She took his plans, his money, his conscience." Holmes cut in. "Yes, I imagine she took that as well. But you buried it along with his bones." Merrow's voice broke. "You don't know what it is to hear them knocking. Every night, the same rhythm through the floors, the walls, my own skull. They call for me." Holmes's gaze was cold, but there was pity in it too. "They called for the truth, Sir Julian. You mistook it for vengeance." A sudden crack split the chamber and a timber shifted above, releasing a shower of stones. The familiar pattern resounded through the walls, 3 slow beats, 1 long pause. Holmes's head lifted sharply. The sound moves downward. The entire structure's hollow. Eleanor clutched at my sleeve. "It's the old drainway. It runs under the hill. Cutter told me it would collapse one day." "Then we shall ensure it collapses upon no living soul," Holmes said. He crossed to the far wall, tracing a gloved hand along the bricks until he found a fissure wide enough to admit light. "Watson, lend me your cane." I passed it to him. He inserted the tip into the crack, levering it free with careful strength. A rush of stale air escaped, followed by another knock closer, now metallic. Holmes listened intently. That is not structure. It's a mechanism. Cutter's final device, perhaps intended to seal the tunnels. Clever even in death. Marrow stumbled back, horror dawning. "You can't open it. It'll bring the whole place down." Holmes's voice was dry, which, if I'm not mistaken, was his intention to bury his sins and yours together. Eleanor stepped forward. "Then open it. End it." I stared at her. "You'll be trapped." She met my eyes with quiet resignation. I was trapped long before this night. Let the city close over its ghosts. Holmes regarded her for a long moment, then spoke in a low, commanding tone. "You will not die for their misdeeds, Mrs. Rayner. You will live to tell them." He turned the cane sharply. The wall gave way with a sighing crack, revealing a narrow chute leading upward, the repair from the surface. A way out. But even as he spoke, the earth trembled. Marrow gave a hoarse cry and lunged toward the opening. Holmes caught him by the collar, the two men struggling in the falling dust. The ceiling shuddered again. I seized Eleanor's arm and pulled her toward the chute, but she resisted, turning back toward the sound. "Let him go, Mr. Holmes," she called. "The ground will take what it's owed." Holmes hesitated just long enough for the decision to be made by fate itself. The floor beneath Marrow cracked like glass. His scream echoed once, then was smothered by the collapse. The chamber convulsed, a thunder of stone and air, and the rhythmic knocking quickened 3 rapid beats. Then silence. Holmes dragged me forward. "Up, Watson! Quickly!" We scrambled through the chute, hauling Eleanor. Between us, the roar of falling earth following close behind. When at last we burst into open air, dawn was breaking pale and cold over the hollow. We collapsed upon the hillside, gasping, covered in dust and half-disbelief. Holmes rose unsteadily, brushing the grime from his coat. "So ends Sir Julian Marrow," he said quietly. And perhaps at last, his knocking. Eleanor stared down into the darkness of the newly sealed pit. "You think it's over? That the dead forget?" Holmes regarded her gravely. "The dead are silent, Mrs. Rayner. It is the living who echo." A gust of wind swept across the hollow, carrying faint debris that rattled against the stones. For a heartbeat, it formed the familiar pattern, 3 soft taps, 1 lingering pause, then faded into stillness. Holmes listened, his face unreadable. "Even memory," he murmured, "insists upon rhythm." We crawled through the breach on hands and knees, the dust choking our breath. Holmes's lamp burned low, throwing fitful rings of gold upon the rough walls. Ahead, the passage narrowed, bending sharply toward a glimmer of movement. I heard a faint rustle, then the weak sound of someone breathing. Holmes called out softly, "Mrs. Rayner." A whisper answered. "Here." We found her wedged against the stones, her arm pinned beneath a fallen beam. The air was thick with powdered earth, and each breath she took came with effort. Holmes dropped to his knees beside her, assessing the debris with swift precision. "The timber is cracked," he said. "If we shift it wrong, the roof will follow." I pressed my shoulder against the beam, but he stopped me. "Wait. Listen." From somewhere above came the slow, unmistakable rhythm. 3 knocks, 1 pause. The very stones seemed to echo it, as if the structure itself mourned. "It's the settling earth," I said. Holmes shook his head. "No, it is the same cadence, deliberate and constant. Someone else is still alive beneath." Eleanor stirred. "It isn't him." The sound began before the fall. Holmes's expression changed curiosity, recognition, then the faintest shadow of awe. The pattern carries through the pipe still. The system has become its own voice. Cutter's labyrinth continues to speak even after every hand that struck it is gone. He placed both hands beneath the beam. Watson, when I count 3, push with me. Slowly, no sudden motion, we heaved as one. The beam groaned, shifted, and lifted just enough for her to pull free. Holmes dragged her clear of the rubble and eased her to the wall. Her face was pale, streaked with grime, but alive with composure. "You've done it," I said, binding her arm with my kerchief. She looked at Holmes. "And you, sir, will you drag me to the gallows now?" Holmes's gaze softened, though his tone remained grave. "The law may pardon where motive redeems. You have lived entombed long enough. Let sunlight, not rope, pass its judgment." She gave a faint, incredulous laugh. Sunlight. I thought I'd forgotten what it meant. The knocking ceased abruptly. In its place came a low, continuous hum, like wind through hollow stone. Holmes looked upward, alert. "What do you hear?" "Yes. It's stronger. The pipes above are collapsing into each other. We have minutes, perhaps less." He turned to Eleanor. "Can you walk?" "With help." He took her uninjured arm and guided her toward the narrow ascent we'd used before. The air thickened, vibrating with the groan of shifting rock. Dust fell like ash. Each movement triggered faint echoes that chased us upward 3 beats, 1 pause, as though the very earth measured our flight. Halfway through the tunnel, Holmes halted, pressing a hand to the wall. They feel that. A rhythmic pulse ran through the brick, steady as a heartbeat. "The vibration travels upward," he said. "It ends in open air. There must be a vent ahead." We forced our way onward until a rectangle of faint grey light appeared. Holmes pushed at it, and a wooden hatch swung free. The rush of cool morning air struck us with near delirious relief. We climbed out into the ruins of the Shepherd's Hollow entrance. The hillside had partially collapsed, but the sky beyond was pale and merciful. Eleanor sank onto the grass, trembling. "It's over," she whispered. Holmes stood above her, breathing hard. "Over, yes, but not complete." He turned toward the ground where the faint knocking still persisted beneath our feet. Slow now, irregular. "What remains?" I asked. "Resolution," he said. "For every story of deceit, there must come an echo of understanding. These sounds are the remnants of guilt reverberating through the system Cutter built. They will fade only when all of every tunnel, every hollow has collapsed." Eleanor looked toward the ridge, then let it fall. Holmes regarded her with quiet respect. "You have survived the truth's weight." "Few do." Lestrade's men arrived within the hour, summoned by Holmes's prior telegram. They found Marrow's body crushed beneath the beam and the remnants of Cutter's network collapsing like a dying lung. Holmes gave them brief instructions, his words clipped and final. "Seal the entrances. No record, no monument. The dead may rest without memorials." As they worked, Eleanor watched in silence. When the last echo died, she turned to Holmes. "You've unburied more than bones tonight. What will you do with me now?" He looked at her steadily. "You will tell the truth under your own name. Nothing more is required." Her eyes shone with something like defiance. "And if I vanish again?" Holmes's reply came almost tenderly. "Then let the city whisper your rhythm until you choose to answer." A faint smile touched her lips. 3 knocks. 1 pause? "The oldest confession of all," he said. She rose, weak but upright. The first sunlight broke through the fog, spilling over the ruins in soft gold. For an instant, the wind caught a loose board and struck it against a beam, 3 hollow taps, 1 lingering pause, before fading into silence. Holmes turned toward me, his eyes reflecting the morning light. "Curious, is it not, Watson?" he murmured, "how truth insists on rhythm." I nodded, and guilt too, perhaps. He smiled faintly. "Yes, but only one of them endures." The final breath of wind swept down the hollow, carrying with it a whisper of settling dust, the softest, most human of sounds. 3 faint knocks, 1 gentle pause. Then it was quiet.